coming out, then it might
Well,
work.
howdy do. I am back. Did you miss me? Oh, no. Hey, how you doing? We're back at the Bear Whisperer Pub, and I'm joined again by Todd Renn out of Sellers, Indiana. Todd and I both have a love of baseball. Now, we have different teams, but I think they're going to interlap more than someone might think. Anyways, my team are Los Angeles Dodgers. I'm a 50-year-old guy. I've been a fan of the Dodgers since I was a wee tot. My dad, actually my uncle ran the concessions for Dodger Stadium, somewhere in the late 90s up until about the mid 70s. And my dad would work, did I say that wrong? Oh, I meant to say 60s. My mind wandered. I think I've had too much drink. From the late 60s to the mid 70s anyway. Anyway, my dad would run the beer concessions for my uncle. So what they did back in those days, Todd, and I should introduce my friend Todd Renn right now, because I'm running longer on the intro than usual. But anyways, what they would do is they inventoried hot dog buns, but not hot dogs. They inventoried Coke cups, but not Coke. So my dad would sneak us into the games, or into the game, and we would bring our own hot dog buns and cups, and we could eat hot dogs and drink Coke all night long for basically free. And being a baseball junkie, I mean, my sisters actually really hated it, but as a kid back then, I just thought it was the best thing ever.
It's interesting that they only did they did it by the bun and not the actual hot dog itself.
Well,
I
I'm
guess the
sure it's
cheapness of
different
it
now.
probably.
But yeah, back then they only inventoried the hot dog buns and not the hot dogs. So yeah, I mean, I would eat tons of dogs. Yeah, back then they had what they called Dodger dogs. They were a foot long hot dog made by Farmer John, which I thought was known nationally, but actually it's just a West Coast thing. And their slogan was the the easternmost in quality, the westernmost in flavor. Farmer John hot dogs. That was the slogan.
Still to this day, though, there's nothing better than a ballpark hot dog.
No, there isn't. No matter who makes it, if you're eating a dog at a ballpark, it's the best. So I'm going to run a little long again. Uh, Back in about '97, I was transferred. I was with a large company that transferred me to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and then I opened a store. I got a promotion and went to El Paso, Texas. There was a double A ballpark called the El Paso Diablos. My wife would go with me out of, courtesy, because she wasn't really a fan of baseball. But at the time, actually, the first time we were out there, we didn't realize she was pregnant at the time. My wife hates hot dogs. And in one game, she ate 4 hot dogs. I think it was, 2 hot dogs, 1 chili dog, and a corn dog, if I remember correctly. We should have known then something was wrong, but at that time, slightly later than that, we realized or found out through the doctor that she was actually pregnant with her son Seamus. But anyways, so Todd, since I talked for a long time there, I'm going to let you talk right now.
Well, growing up in the Louisville, southern Indiana area, Cincinnati is the team that I pull for. I don't know, it has to do from, I guess, being born in the 70s, with the Big Red Machine and whatnot, and being able to, in the summer, it's just an hour and 45 minute drive for us to go to what then was Riverfront Stadium, and that was usually kind of a family type trip once a year, 2 or 3 times a year maybe, but at least once a year we'd go to the ball game, stay the night, and maybe go to there's an amusement park there in Cincinnati, not Cincinnati, but northern Cincinnati, I guess, or maybe eastern Cincinnati, called Kings Island. Nice little family weekend, go to the game and then go to the amusement park. So, oddly enough, though, growing up in a household of Yankee fans, my dad was a big Yankee fan, when he was a kid, which I guess makes sense, back then being probably Brooklyn Dodgers, Yankees, maybe the Giants, whatever, your dominant teams back in the 60s. But I stayed for the homegrown team. I'm a Reds fan at heart and diehard Reds fan. So,
What, did the Reds win the World Series in '76 or '77?
in '76, I believe.
'76. That's what I thought. So I'm going to tell you a short. Well, it's going to probably end up long, but I'm going to try to make it short. Anyway, my mom and dad had these two great friends that were from Cincinnati, and they knew I was a Dodger fan, but I was also a Reds fan because of the players on the Reds at the time in the '70s. I was a huge Johnny Bench fan. I thought Johnny Bench was the best there ever was. I was also a fan of Dave Concepcion and the other players that the Reds had at that particular time. So my dad's friends lived in Cincinnati, and they were coming out to visit us. So they actually brought me the actual Cincinnati papers from all 7 games of that World Series.
Oh wow, that's cool.
I kept them for a long time. I think I still have them. They're packed away somewhere, so I'm going to have to look for them again. But they're not clippings; they're the actual whole newspapers that have the sports sections in them.
All right. So you mentioned Dave Concepcion. I'm going to give you a little quiz here. See how much of a fan you were. What did he do before his first at bat every time before he stepped in the box? Any ideas? And he did this every single game.
Oh goodness! See, I'm an old guy. My memory is not as good as it used to be. Didn't he used to tap the bat?
No, he always do the. I guess maybe he was Catholic.
Yeah,
he always do the
spectacles, testicles, wallet, watch. Yeah.
yes, that's it.
But didn't he also always tap the bat against the back of his shoe?
He might have, but all I can remember for sure was he always did the.
He always did the test. Spectacles, testicles, wallet, watch.
And he only did that in his first at bat. He would never do it the rest of the game. But the tapping of the shoe he might have done the rest of the time.
I just remember him tapping his. But anyway, yeah, I thought Dave Concepcion was maybe once there ever was.
Oh, he was. Yeah, he was. And I still think to this day that he doesn't get enough credit for how good he actually was.
So being a Reds fan, I want to get a little controversial with you. Pete Rose.
Okay, my take.
Should Pete be in the Hall of Fame?
Yes, my take on a lot of these guys, even in the '90s era, like Barry Bonds and the steroid era. My take on that is they should be in the Hall of Fame because they put great numbers up against the same type of caliber players. Not to say that everybody cheated during that time, because you got like great, King Griffey Jr., who I think is probably my favorite player.
Pete didn't cheat. Pete played honest.
No, he did. Yeah, I mean, he gave 100%, 110%. I mean, he was the epitome of 110% if there ever was one.
So what's the argument for keeping him out of the Hall of Fame? Is that he bet against baseball, right?
Yeah, which I think is complete and utter BS.
I agree. See, my argument with that every time it comes up is I don't think you can ever watch any game that Pete Rose played, especially All-Star games. If you watch the All-Star game with him knocking Ray Fosse over, this is a guy that played hard every time. If you want to say he had a sickness and maybe he bet too much, absolutely, I'll agree with that. But if you're saying he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame because he made some personal mistakes, I think you're wrong. Because we have some assholes in the Hall of Fame. We got Ty Cobb, who was a known racist. You got a lot of problems with the Hall of Fame. So let Pete in. He made some mistakes. He gambled. But the Hall of Fame is about playing hard, and Pete played hard, and nobody played harder than Pete Rose.
I couldn't agree 100%. I mean, he bet on baseball. And who's to say whether he, even at the time when he was coaching the Reds, I don't think he ever threw a game to win.
No, I don't think he did. I think he might have bet on baseball games, but I don't think he threw a game because I don't think he had it in him. Pete played hard, man. He didn't cheat. He didn't take, he didn't take steroids. He didn't do anything to enhance his game. He just played hard every time. So if you're putting players in the Hall of Fame that have the numbers, if you're putting players in the Hall of Fame that played hard and loved the game, I don't know how you can justify keeping Pete out. If your justification is, well, Pete was an asshole and he did wrong, well, there's a lot of assholes in the Hall of Fame that did wrong.
Well, I mean, you have like Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris, for instance. You know, those guys, more so Mickey Mantle was a known alcoholic. You know, and he was one of
Yes,
the
he was. But see, alcoholism was acceptable back then.
Well, and it may have been, but that's you're splitting hairs at that
Well,
point.
you are, because if you're saying, well, Tom, alcoholism is a disease. He should be, let it go. Leave Mickey alone. I agree, but gambling is also considered the same disease. So,
right.
Leave Pete alone, man. Hall of Fame is about players that played hard, that have the numbers, that deserve to be there. Pete deserves to be there.
I agree. And that kind of falls in line with my argument with the guys that were on steroids. You had that time period of the 90s, maybe late 80s, early, throughout the 90s. How are you splitting? Now, obviously, Greg Maddux, for instance, who was great during that time period, for one, who I think doesn't get enough credit, for how great he actually was. I mean, you're talking about a pitcher that never probably broke 90 in his life. If he did, it was just on a good day. But he was a mastermind on the mound.
Yeah, when you're talking about performance-enhancing drugs, I think that's a different argument. But when you're looking at Pete Rose, who did nothing but play baseball hard, you gotta let him in. So
I agree. I agree. But
I'm a fan of Tommy John. It's kind of one of those facts that if you have 300 wins, you get into the Hall of Fame. But there are a lot of pitchers that don't have 300 wins and are also in the Hall of Fame. Tommy John was denied the Hall of Fame so many times, he's never getting in there now. But he has 297 career wins. He really should have been admitted to the Hall of Fame. But there's a lot of jealousy because he was the first to have the Tommy John surgery. Tommy John should be in the Hall of Fame. He's 3 games shy of 300. He got screwed beyond belief.
Oh, I'd agree. If nothing else, he ought to be in the Hall of Fame just because he's got a surgery named after him.
I'm saying.
Nobody even knows.
Well, I look at some of the players that are in the Hall of Fame, and I look at some of those that aren't. And it's the same way I look at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, to be honest with you. I look at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and say, really? You got Prince in the Hall of Fame? Seriously? I'm not saying Prince isn't a decent musician. I'm not even saying Prince can't write a good pop tune. But he's in the Hall of Fame where you got some amazing folks, amazing rock and roll people that aren't in the Hall of Fame. Link Ray, for instance. And you got Prince in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I think the same thing's happening in the Baseball Hall of Fame. You got a whole lot of people that are kind of marginal, and you've got these folks that really ought to be there that aren't.
Well, to me, I think the Hall of Fame has become more of a popularity contest.
Well, it is.
Who you were friends with.
Well, you've got the sports writers that vote on it. So you got folks that have really a disconnect with people anyway.
Well, and I think it's also from year to year, it's almost a forced, depending on who's up for the bids that year. It almost seems forced at times too.
It does. And then you've got folks that may be controversial for another reason that has nothing to do with baseball, so they get voted out.
And why should there be a limit on the number of years?
It's about baseball. Let these people in, man. Forget about the other stuff.
And why should there be a limit on the number of years that you're eligible for it?
Yeah, that irritates me.
Like Tommy John, for instance. So maybe you have a down year, a down year of guys that aren't really worthy of the Hall of Fame. Why should you kick him out just because? Well, his time's passed. Does that matter?
I just think at this point you got so many sports writers, because the sports writers that decide that have no idea who he is at this point. I'm a 50-year-old guy, and he's older than I am, so I think most of the younger sports writers have no idea the contributions this man made to the sport. And I think a lot of them forget there was a 4-year period where this man was the winningest pitcher in all of baseball, not the American League, not the National League, but he had a 4-year period after the surgery where he was the winningest pitcher in baseball. And at that point, they didn't even know if the surgery was going to work.
And that's probably half the problem now is you got so many writers that, like you said, most of them probably have never seen a lot of these guys even play in person. They're watching Sports Center to catch the highlights of a guy, and then they just look at the stats on paper.
And he has 297 career wins. 297. Now, there are other pitchers in the Hall of Fame that don't have 300 wins. So he wouldn't be the first. But you're talking about a guy that's 3 wins short of guaranteed Hall of Fame. And you're gonna keep him out? It just pisses me off to no end.
Now, the only thing I would combat for that is how many years did he actually pitch?
Well, he pitched a long time, man. He pitched for about 20 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm just kind of playing the double-edged sword here.
But yeah,
I don't disagree.
I get that, but I think you still got to give him credit for the fact that, one, he did have the winningest record in baseball for 4 years, and he still managed to have some longevity.
No, I don't.
At a time when pitching 20 years was a hell of a long shot.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I for one also think that he should be in the Hall of Fame. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate here from the writer's perspective. Is 297 wins over 20 years? You think 20 years?
I think he pitched about 20. Yeah.
So that's what. Quick math. That's what 12, 13 wins a season.
I mean, right? Yeah. I mean, these guys need to be in the Hall of Fame, man.
But I would agree with you because you got guys that are making the Hall of Fame that are just marginal at best. Not that they didn't have good careers, but they're not Hall of Fame careers.
Well, I mean, you got guys that have been that get in the Hall of Fame because they have a small handful of great years, but they don't have a long career. Right. I think you got to give folks credit that were able to last that long.
Oh, I would agree. I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I was just kind of playing the devil's advocate a little bit, I guess.
No, and I'm okay with that. But back to your 70s Reds. I mean, the 70s Reds were freaking amazing, man.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to me, I think, usually the comparison of the greatest teams of all time, you always get the Big Red Machine of the 75, 76, 2-year span there with the 1947 or 48 Yankees, Murderers Row or whatever it was.
Yeah, that Big Red Machine during that period was just brutal. I mean, what you had Johnny Bench, you had Tony Perez,
Morgan.
Concepcion, Joe Morgan on second, Concepcion at short.
Rose.
I mean, the double play combination was just brutal.
They had Foster in the outfield.
Foster in the outfield.
Geronimo, I think it was in center.
Geronimo and Ken Griffey.
Yeah. I mean,
Ken Griffey won, yeah.
Yeah, the original Ken Griffey.
All the credit seems to go to Junior, but Ken Griffey won was pretty freaking outstanding.
Yeah. Well, which tells you in itself how good of a career did you have that you were head and shoulders above the original.
Yeah, I mean, Ken Griffey was great. Yeah,
and he did it in a time period of which I don't think that he ever did PEDs or steroids in a time period that everybody else did, which to me elevates him even that much higher as far as how good he actually was.
Yeah, I agree.
Which also is back to my original point of saying, and I hated the Atlanta Braves, Greg Maddux for one, who, maybe through 91, 92 on a great day, did that in that time period where everybody was taking the PEDs.
Greg Maddux, I don't know how anybody can say he wasn't the best pitchers of all time.
Oh, he's at least. I mean, if you want to argue that he's not, he's at least top 2 or 3 easy, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, he's amazing. Yeah, I mean, he had that's another guy with a very long career.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's just it amazes me.
If you want to take the other side to that story, I mean, Sandy Koufax, for instance, the Dodgers. Sandy Koufax is one of those guys that shined very brightly for a short period of time. You had to argue he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame because he was just that good and that dominant for a short period, but he didn't have a long career. But I think if you're willing to accept that, you have to accept the opposite argument that somebody who's able to really sustain a career, if you're able to last 20 years in a sport where the average lifespan is 7 to 10 years maximum, if you're able to go 20 years and still have a great career, I think you have to argue the same point that they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah, for sure. I would agree with that 100%.
Maddox, I mean, again, I'm going to say Tommy John, but Greg Maddox should be in the Hall of Fame. That's without question.
Well, I think didn't he get didn't he get elected a year or so ago?
Yeah, he's in the Hall of Fame. But
Okay.
I'm saying you've got that long career. I mean, of course. And he's got over 300 wins. I don't remember exactly how many he's got, but I'm pretty sure Maddox has well over 300.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys that pitched for near 20 years also.
No, I think he went a little over, right at 20.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's right in that time frame. But no, I agree with you. Tommy John 100% should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, there is no doubt. I'm not arguing Sandy Koufax shouldn't be there. Of course he should. Sandy Koufax was brilliant, but he's a guy who shined brightly for a very short period of time. But if you're willing to accept that premise, I think you have to look at the other side of that and say, if someone had a nice long career, he was able to sustain himself, and at one point during his career be dominant, like John was, I think you have to put him in the Hall of Fame as well.
Do you think a lot of the Sandy Koufax though is part of that he was in an era where left-handers were almost non-existent and he was kind of the rarity?
Left-handers, I just think it was that time. I mean, it was kind of that golden era of baseball. I'm not sure it was so much that he was a left-hander. I just think it was so much that, well, one, he was just so not that he was dominant. It was that he was crazy dominant.
Well, and the only reason why I say that is because even today, when people talk about some of your top left-handers in the game, he's always mentioned as far as let alone just forget about pitching in general, but just as far as left-handers go, he's always mentioned as one of the greatest ever as a left-hander. And I almost wonder if that doesn't play, somewhat into it, I guess.
And Greg had 355 wins. I mean, he had a lot of wins. But I mean, you look at that long career, and he's got a stretch where he's not winning as much. There's a stretch where he's losing more than he's winning.
Yeah. And another guy that kind of gets swept
man.
And another guy kind of gets swept, under the rug a little bit during that same time, and then played on the same team as Smoltz.
Oh yeah, Smoltz was great too. I mean, Glavine.
Glavine, yeah. I mean, you're talking, Smoltz for me, he went from a starter to a reliever who was one of the best closers, back to a starter again.
That was an amazing thing because you see a lot of starters going to becoming relievers, becoming closers. That's not necessarily unusual, but you rarely, if ever, see people back to being starters again. That was the odd part. I mean, it's kind of a natural course of a career to see a great pitcher become a reliever, but to see him become a starter again, that was odd.
Yeah, at towards the end of his career. I mean, to me, that's just. Yeah,
Smoltz was great. You had Tommy Glavine at that time, too. Tommy Glavine was freaking amazing.
Yeah, true. And like I said, I hated the Braves growing up, obviously from the old East to West divisional rival type thing, And also with TBS airing every single game that they ever had back in the day. It was just, it was a shame kind of to see that those teams really didn't do as well as they probably should have with the pitching that they had.
Yeah.
I mean, they were divisional and, went to the World Series, how many times? But I think they only came away with, what, one title? Maybe two at the most. Right? In the 90s?
You know what? I've had too much to drink tonight to really. If you
Me
want me to
too.
look up facts, I'm going to have to pull up shit on the internet. But yeah, I don't know. We're going to have to start looking shit up if you want me to know that. Yeah, you know, the 70s, I mean, that Big Red Machine in the 70s was just amazing. I mean, those guys were, I mean, you had Johnny Bench that was just incredible. You had Tony Perez, you had Morgan, you had Concepcion. I mean, the whole team was freaking amazing. You also had good pitching that kind of gets forgot about too, because your offense and your defense was just so amazing. It wasn't this that Johnny Bench could hit home runs. It wasn't just that Joe Morgan could steal a base. It wasn't just that Davey Concepcion could lay down a bunt. Is that all these guys had incredible defensive skills. I mean, the whole team was amazing. I mean, Johnny Bench is arguably one of the best defensive catchers there ever was in baseball, and he's also one of the most offensive catchers of all time. The guy was amazing.
Oh yeah. And even today, if you were to show a young kid, the fundamentals of baseball and how the game should be played, I would show them, films of the Big Red Machine.
I mean, also Joe Morgan, for instance, was mostly what a 250 to 275 hitter through most of his career. But what people forget was the man was freaking clutch. You know, when he needed a hit, he got it, or he got walked, or he got hit by a pitch. Joe Morgan knew how to get on base, and he can also run pretty quick for a short guy. Yeah, Concepcion, again, a guy who hit between 250 to 260 typically. He had a couple better years here and there. Uh, Also, a guy who could lay a bunt. I mean, you had guys with skills who knew where they lacked and could make it up. And Tony Perez was just amazing offensively and defensively.
Of course, I don't know. Maybe I could be thinking wrong, but during that time frame in that era, though, wasn't it kind of unheard of to hit more than 300?
It
Like your
was,
two
especially
seventies, 280s was really a good season, though, right?
it
I
was
don't know.
actually, especially if you're a second baseman or a shortstop. Most shortstops at the time, uh,
We're shitty hitters.
they were. A lot of them hit between 2.25 and 275 top end because at that time you were looking more for a defensive player at shortstop.
Yeah.
Baseball has changed a lot. Where you right now you're going to sacrifice off defensive talent if you've got a guy that can hit, but that wasn't the case back then. A good point I like to make is a shortstop that nobody remembers now from the Baltimore Orioles, Belanger. Art Belanger was arguably one of the best defensive shortstops of the 70s, especially in the American League. But he hit somewhere between 200 and 250 top end. He usually hit about 2.25. A terrible offensive, but his defense was so amazing, he had a long career.
Yeah, that was always kind of your cornerstone of your defense was and still kind of today, you're only as good defensively as your shortstop and your middle infielders
That's right. And
and your center
Concepcion
fielder.
usually hit about 260 to 275. But you're right. At that time, that was considered a damn high batting average for sure.
You know, yeah, I mean, and even today, I would think that would still hold true. I mean, if you hit 270, 280 plus as a shortstop, you're doing something out of kind of astronomical, really.
Well, I don't know. I just think today's game is more about offense than defense. Yeah,
No,
but
it is.
I just remember as a kid looking at some of these pitchers and some of these defensive teams. You saw a lot of 1-0 games back then. You saw a lot of 2-0 games back then. And I think Americans seem to have a shorter and shorter attention span, and we don't want to see 1-0, 2-0 games anymore. I mean, I personally would, but most people want to see 11-10 games. So I think teams are concentrating more on offense than defense.
Well, you know why that is, though, right? TV. Got to get the numbers for TV. Got to get
Well,
people
yeah, I think that,
interested in
but
watching the
again,
games.
TV was big back then too, but I think you cared more about the game. I think people just want to see big numbers right now. You don't want to see. I mean, personally, right now I'm a 50-year-old guy. I would love. There's nothing more for me. The best baseball game to watch right now is a great pitcher's duel. If a game goes 1-0 all through the ninth, I think that's the best baseball game to watch. But I'm one of the very few that agree with that.
I would agree with you 100%.
If I'm watching a great play game, if I'm seeing a great pitch game, if I'm seeing incredible defense, if I'm seeing a guy making a play at third base that he shouldn't make to get an out, and the game ends at 1-0, I think to me that's the best baseball game in the world. But most folks want to see a 15-13 game these days.
Yeah, but you know who those people are? They're people that aren't really baseball fans.
No, they're not. They're folks with really really short attention spans. We're so now I'm going to insult people. No, we're talking about folks that think they need action in a certain way.
It's a microwave society.
Yeah, it is. There are folks that don't understand that a 1-0 game has just as much action as a 15-13 game if you're paying attention.
Well, I think a lot of it becomes the understanding of the game itself. It's more like a chess match of what you're doing defensively.
Todd, I've had the same argument with people. I've used those exact same words. My wife's here just shaking her head. I've said those exact same words to folks. Baseball is chess. Where football is checkers. Yeah, yeah. It's not about constant action. It's about playing smart. Baseball is chess. You're exactly right, man.
No, I mean, I've had that argument for a long time too with people. It's like, I want to see the long ball. I'm like, why? It's just as good to see somebody strike out 1, 2, 3.
But don't you want to see that long ball and that center fielder somehow make that catch that he's not supposed to have, and all of a sudden you've got that 1-0 game? I mean,
yeah, which is why I love King Griffey Jr. so much, because he always made that catch.
I want to see. Yeah, I agree, man. It's that defense. See, I don't understand why folks don't see those defensive plays as just as brilliant as the offensive plays.
Well, it's like anything. The offense, you shoot the 3-pointer, you score the touchdown, you get the home run, they get the glory.
When someone makes a catch, they're not supposed to. When someone makes a throw, I once saw a little-known player, actually, a guy that really never became famous, R.J. Reynolds. He was with the Dodgers at the time.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
R.J. Reynolds once made a throw from right field when he was with the Dodgers. The throw. I really thought he was going to be famous after this play, but he wasn't. R.J. Reynolds made a throw from right field, a catch he wasn't supposed to make, to throw a player out at home plate that nobody thought he could make the throw, and he did. See, I don't understand why people don't see those plays and think, wow, that's brilliant.
No, I agree 100%. I would agree 100%.
But everybody wants that home run. Everybody wants, those big hits. And I don't necessarily have an issue with seeing a home run, but I don't know how you can watch a great catch and a great throw and think, wow, that's not what good sports is. I mean, that's a brilliant play. That's what baseball is all about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to me, I'm like you. Best game would be going into the ninth. 0-0. The guy gets a base hit. You bunt him over, scoring position, and maybe the next guy drives him in.
Right? Yeah, see, it's about strategy. Yeah, see, that's it. So we're on the same page. It's about that strategy. You got them over. What do you do now? See, that's why I like the National League as opposed to the American League. Because then you're dealing with a pitcher coming up to bat, right? So what do? You pull your pitcher. You got a tight game. It's 0-0, ninth inning. So do you pull the pitcher to put a hitter in, or do you go with your pitcher because he's the guy you want in the next inning? See,
absolutely.
You lose that strategy in the American League. It becomes all about offense and less about strategy, and that's why the National League is real baseball, man.
Yes, I would agree 100%. I hate the DH, and I hope it never becomes.
I think it's the worst thing that ever happened to baseball. I think the DH promoted these short attention spans, and I think you and I are going to irritate a lot of people with this. So, anyways, we've been going on for about 45 minutes. So, any closing thoughts?
Go Reds! Even though we're gonna suck this year, we traded all our good players away except for a hand, just one or two. But no, if you're a purist, get Pete Rose, get Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame.
Get Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame. I agree. You're a diehard Dodger fan, and we haven't won the World Series since 1988. So I have I'm not delusional. It ain't gonna happen this year for us. But hey, but I'm not a guy that trades teams. So I appreciate you being a Reds fan, and I'm a Dodger fan. I just would like to see baseball get back to its roots and forget about pleasing the masses and just get about playing good baseball again. I'm Tom the Beer Whisperer. We're gonna sign off. And if I offended you, I don't really give a rat's ass.